Hi everyone, I'm Jane, and today we're going to paint a fireside beach scene. Now this painting was developed from a photograph that I got from a website called stocksnap.io. Stocksnap is a really cool website because there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photos on there that are free to use for any purpose. So you can go and find a photo that you really like and you can paint it, and there's no licensing issues with that. I'll include a link to StockSnap in the description below, so make sure you check that out. I'll also link directly to the photo that this painting is based on. Painting from a photo is a really fun and exciting way to help develop your skills better. It forces you to problem solve a little bit. It helps you develop your paint mixing abilities. So that's what a lot of this is going to be focused on today. So here's the photo that the painting is based on, and here's the painting that I came up with. Now, as you guys are following along with me, your paintings are going to turn out looking completely different from both the photo and my painting, and that's okay. Never go into it with the idea that you're going to copy it perfectly. If copying it perfectly were the end goal, then you could just print it out. There would be no need for you to paint it. Take your experiences, your interpretations of the image, your personal artistic style, and take that image and make it your own with all of those things. You do not have to come away with a painting that's exactly the image. Make sure you check out the video description below for a full list of materials, and let's get started. For today's painting, we're going to use the following colors: Phthalo Blue, Burnt Sienna, Titanium White, Mars Black, Burnt Umber, Alizarin Crimson, Naphthol Crimson, and Cadmium Yellow Deep Hue. The brushes we'll be using are a 1-inch flat brush. I have 2 angle brushes. One of them is a little bit bigger than the other one. But the reason I'm using 2 is because this is an old one that's kind of lost its shape. It's a little bit puffy. And this is a newer one that's a little bit nicer. This one is 1/2 inch. This one is 5/8. If they're both about 1/2 inch, that's fine. If you only have one, that's fine too. I'll just be painting a little more aggressively with this one, and so I don't want to damage my nice brush. And I have 2 little flat brushes. One is smaller than the other one, not by much. But the reason I'm using these is because they are cruddy brushes. They're very soft, they don't have stiff bristles, but they don't have a definite shape. And I want that for when we start adding the rocks to the beach. I don't want to have hard lines. So remember when I told you to never throw a brush away? If you've got brushes that are sitting off to the side that you never use because they're not really good for anything, go through them and just find 2 smaller ones that you would never use for anything else and try those out. I'm painting on a 12 by 16 inch stretched canvas. It's a brand new canvas. I haven't prepared it in any way. I didn't use gesso or anything. All right, to start out, we're gonna paint our sky, and we're gonna fade it down into the ocean, and we're gonna fade that down into the beach. So the photo here is basically what we're gonna be painting today, and I'll include a link to where you can download the photo in the description below. If you look at the sky, our mind interprets it as blue, a very, very pale blue, but you don't want to just go straight into your phthalo blue with some white and put it on there, because you're going to have a very bright blue, even if it's very light. This sky is very gray, and it's more neutral than blue. So that's why I have my phthalo blue, which is a green hue blue, and I've got my burnt sienna, which is a warm brown. So when I mix those 2 together, the warmth and the green are going to neutralize each other. So the blue won't be quite so intense. But I'm going to use a hint of black because that's going to gray everything down and take the saturation down. So I've got my 1-inch flat brush, and I'm going to wet it in the jar and then wipe off the excess on the edge. I'm going to start by grabbing a little bit of blue, not a lot, and a little bit of brown. And see how when I mix them together, I get just kind of a muddy neutralized blue. I'm gonna grab a hint of black, and I'm gonna bring all of this over to my white. And just keep adding until it's about the color that you see in the sky. We're going for the mid-tones, so not the white part in the sky and not the darkest part, but the main part of the sky. So I'm gonna go fairly light. Now can you see that that still appears to be blue, but it's not like a bright sunny day blue. It's like a cloudy sky. Maybe the sun is low in the sky. Just kind of a grayed out color. So I'm gonna take this color just side to side. And I feel like that's probably still just a little darker than I want. So I'm gonna grab some more white and just go right over top of it. If you get streaks in your sky with the white, leave them there. I'm using very parallel brush strokes to get that expansive feel, and so that when I get little streaks, they look like little wisps of clouds. And every time I pick up paint, I'm picking up a slightly different combination of colors. All right, so if you notice in our photo here, the water takes up about 2 inches right in the middle of our canvas. So my sky has already come down far enough to the point where I can start doing the water. And if you notice, the water is really the same colors as the sky. It's just a little bit darker in the back. So I'm gonna mix up a very similar color to what I did here again. And mix it in with my white. So remember the first color that I mixed up, that I put up here? So pretty much that's about what I'm going for. So you can take your paint as you mix it and hold it up to what you've already painted. I think that's a little bit lighter than that. Just grab a tiny bit more. Don't worry about drawing a line for the horizon just yet. Just start laying that color on there. At that blend line, you can turn your brush on its edge to help blend them together a bit. Grab a tiny bit more white if you need to. Okay, now we're gonna start blending our beach in. And the beach is brown, but this is too warm and too light. So I have some burnt umber, and I'm gonna mix burnt umber, burnt sienna, white, black, and even a tiny hint of blue, because the blue is gonna help gray those two browns down. So I'm gonna grab more brown than I did before. I'm gonna grab some of this brown. I'm gonna grab a little bit of black, and I'm gonna mix it with some white. I think I need a little more of this brown. And now I'm gonna grab a hint of blue. See, just a tiny bit. But see how that blue kind of grayed the brown. Now it's not such a stark, phony looking brown because the ground there is not like a real obvious brown. A little bit more black. Maybe just a tiny bit more black. There we go. And then the same thing, just back and forth. If your blend here at the water isn't perfect, that's okay, because we are going to add some little waves, and so you can make the waves kind of cover that. At the bottom of the beach here, it's a little bit darker, so I'm going to grab some more black and some more of this brown. And start blending that in. Remember, when you're blending colors, you push the brush flat like that to lay extra paint down. When you want to blend them together, you just use the end of the brush and use very light pressure. So flat to lay color down and light to blend them together. Okay, just want to darken that corner up a bit. And I think I'm actually going to bring my water line up a little bit higher. Now, if you've seen my Foggy Forest video, you know to make a straight line, I like to be able to put my hand on the canvas and just let gravity bring my arm straight down. For me, that's the easiest way to make a straight line. So that's what I'm going to do here. If you're not comfortable with that, to make the horizon here, you can use a ruler and draw it on first if you like. So I have my angle brush that has the nicer edge, and I wet it in the jar and wiped it off. And I'm going to mix up a color similar to this. So again, a little blue, a little burnt sienna, a little black, and some white. And hold it up and see how it looks. I think that's a little bluer than what I've got going on. That looks better. All right, so my angle brush, the angle is pointing up. I'm gonna put my hand on my canvas right where I want the horizon, and I'm gonna let gravity bring my arm straight down. Now I'm gonna start filling this in so that I get a little bit of a fade from a darker to a lighter, like in the photo that we're painting. You can use the edge of the brush. And mix up a little more whenever you need to. Now I'm going to start working a little more white into that. Now we're going to add a little bit more definition to the ground, and I'm not going to wash off my brush. I've still got some of that blue mixture in there, but since I'm adding a little bit of blue to the brown in here anyway, that's fine. So we're gonna get a little more burnt sienna, a little more burnt umber, and more black. And pull a little white into there. Now this time I'm not gonna let it blend in with the beach. If you notice in our photo here, there's a very dark line, especially right about here, that separates the beach from the water, and I kind of interpret that as a little bit of a hill in the beach. So I'm going to put my brush on its edge, and the tip is dragging just right about here. And then where it's a little heavier, I'm just pushing a little harder. A little extra water to make sure that paint flows nicely. And let it taper off. Over here we've got one that's about right here and kind of comes down a little bit. So all we're really doing right now on the beach is adding in some of the darker areas. So when you look at this little picture, I know it's small and it's probably hard to see, but that's okay when we're doing this, because what that does is it forces you to only see the colors and the shadows. You don't really have access to the small details, and the small details you can get hung up on when you're trying to copy a picture. So look and see where the areas in the beach are the darkest. If you have to squint your eyes to blur it out a little bit more, that's okay too. So I see another little bit of a dark area right about here. And I'm going to widen this one out a bit. There's a little bit more of a dark area right in here. So I turn my brush flat to do that. There's some darkness right in here. It's a little bit darker right about here. And right about in here. Now all of the rocks area at the very bottom is darker than this, but we're gonna do that a little bit different. So don't worry about putting this color there, because this color here is also a little more gray than brown. So go ahead and get some more black. And we don't really want this color a whole lot darker than that color we were just using. We just want it a little more on the gray side. So about like that. And I'm just gonna scatter. It's not this entire area that's got this dark gray. And notice it's not covering my canvas all the way. I'm not blending, I'm just getting that tone on there. Let's add a little more of that brown in. And the tiniest speck of blue, just a tiny one. And we'll start working on some of the middle tones. So I'm gonna get some more white, and I'm gonna go lighter than, not a ton lighter, but definitely lighter than this color that I did. Hold it up and see. The color that I did there is way too light. Well, no, I think that'll be okay. I'm just lightly swiping over it. So the brown that I already laid down, this darker one, is about dry. So it's not really blending with this color, but that's okay. I'm just swiping over it. Just remember to keep a little extra water on your brush. And don't worry about blending. We're just worrying about adding that tone. And I'm adding it just right underneath this darker area that I added. And if you happen to pick up some of that darker tone and streak it into other parts of the sand, that's perfectly cool. It's just going to give you another layer of dimension. just be really free with this, wherever you feel like it should go. If you're looking at the photo and there's a piece of it that you don't understand, your mind just can't make sense out of, you know, what it is exactly that you're looking at, then don't worry about it. Do what makes sense to you. Just because you are copying a photo doesn't mean that you're going to do it wrong if it doesn't look exactly like the photo. My painting doesn't look exactly like the photo. My colors are quite different, but everybody interprets color different, and everybody's going to mix color different, and so that's totally okay. You could take 20 incredibly experienced artists and tell them to copy the photograph in a painting as closely as possible. And they're all gonna use different colors. They're gonna execute the painting different, and they're all gonna look completely different. So the goal here is not to copy the painting. The goal is to give yourself an exercise in painting what you see. You know, mixing color, interpreting color, knowing what colors are gonna do what together. What brush stroke is gonna give you a certain look. What brush to use. That's what this is really an exercise in. So I fully expect that your paintings are gonna look different from the photo, and your paintings are gonna look different than my painting. And I'm still just adding that same exact mixture of color. Notice how light it looks right here. I did not add more white to it, but because of this darker area, it looks lighter. But see, it's the same color. Now I'm gonna use just the end of the brush and lightly feather that in. I'm barely touching the canvas. Same on the edge here. Because there's still some lighter areas in this darker part. And we're gonna go back over it and add some more anyway. And I'm gonna use my finger a little bit to smooth that out. All right, let's add a little bit more white into that now. And we're just gonna add a few highlights to the beach. Some lighter areas. So kind of look at where the lighter areas are. I see one just above this shadow here. Kind of all through here a bit. A little up here. Here. And then scattered in here. So that's where I'm going to focus on putting these. Super light pressure. Remember, harder to lay paint down, softer to blend it together. So I did put a little bit of pressure on my brush when I laid down that first bit of this lighter color, but now I'm really just dusting it like that. See, I'm barely, if you look at my finger, there's almost no paint on there. That's the brush stroke that I'm using right now. So when you add a highlight on top of a shadow, like here and here and even here, what this tells your eye is that the highlighted area is higher and the darker area is in shadow. So that creates a hill. Like if you look here, it almost looks like a ridge. This part is up higher, this part is lower. So it's kind of a ridge. And we're going to focus on that exact same principle when we get into the sky and the water. And I think I'm going to add just a little bit right here, not too much. Maybe a little spot in there. Now I told you we were gonna do some of the streaks in the sky, but really I feel like my sky is streaky enough and I don't really need to add anything else. But if you're gonna add some more to your sky, you're gonna mix up similar colors here and do it like here, where we've got the highlight on top of the shadow, and you can use the same brush strokes. We are gonna do a variation of that in the water here. It'll be a little bit different, but it's gonna give the illusion of waves without actually drawing waves. All right, so I've got my junky older angle brush here. You see how it's kind of puffy. The bristles are starting to get stiff. It's just, I would not be able to draw a nice horizon with this brush. All right, so I wet it in my jar and I'm gonna mix up a dark color, about like that. So some blue, some black, some sienna, and some white. Hold it up to it, see how you're doing. I think that'll be good. So I'm gonna drag the edge of this horizontal and just make some little lines. As they're farther back in the distance, they're gonna be narrower and closer together. Take my larger brush and then just lightly swipe over them. That's not removing them. It's just kind of fading them in a bit, softening them. If it's not softening them enough, turn it on the edge and go over it that way. And I'm gonna add a little more blue. Yeah, there we go. That's the color I want. I'm gonna push a little harder as I get closer to the front and then just swipe over that. I'm not trying to blend it. It's just fading it a little bit. See, now it's starting to look like we've got some shadows in here. So to make some of those really look like waves, we're gonna put a highlight on top of it. Let's just add a couple more. Especially in our painting, we have a really dark one that's kind of big right about here. So I'm gonna push pretty hard on my brush. To get that. We have another one right about here. It almost looks like it's a continuation of this one. And I'm going to smooth those out just a little bit, especially at the bottom. Make sure your brush is slightly damp. There we go. And then we have one more that goes actually almost all the way across. Right over top of that one. And out. Immediately smooth it out on the bottom. There you go. We're starting to get some waves. Let's add some white, get some highlights, and make some of them look like they're crashing. So I'm going to use this brush. It's maybe a little more than 1/4 of an inch across. It's flat, but can you see how puffy it is? There's no way that I could get a nice sharp line off of this brush, and so I next to never use it. But it was soft and kind of puffy, and that's exactly what I wanted in a brush for this next part. So I'm going to use it dry, and I'm actually going to pick up this color we were just doing with our dark waves and grab a hint of white just to lighten it up a little bit. Now I've got this brush kind of loaded up with paint, and I don't want that much paint, so I'm going to take it over here and just kind of wipe some of it off. Come over to your waves, and along the top edge we're going to kind of push. See how I'm letting the brush kind of crush and just flick? I'm not actually doing a brush stroke. There's no streaking. It's just kind of a push. And I'm letting the bristles, I'm really letting the bristles do what they want. So they're kind of going, you know, just flipping all over the place. If you haven't done a technique like this before and you're kind of unsure about it, or you're not sure that the brush you have is going to do what you want, just practice with it and a few different brushes to see which one gives you the effect you want. So I'm not trying to cover all of the shadow down here. I'm just kind of putting a little bit of some dark crashes at the top, and we will lighten it up. But you don't want to go straight. Ooh, I got a little black in there. You don't want to go straight to white because then it's going to look really phony. You want to make sure there's a little bit of a shadow in there. And I'm going to go across all of these closer ones. Kind of lost my blue. I'm going to add a little more blue in there. See, crush, just totally crushing that brush and kind of pushing up a little bit. I'm not swiping up, I'm not like painting a flick. It's like crush and I'm just letting it move upwards. And I know because this color is not much different than the ocean, that's kind of hard to see. I just hope you can see how we're breaking up the top edge of that wave. This one has quite a bit. But over here it doesn't have much, so I'm not really going to do any there. We'll just start here and give this one quite a bit up at the top. Oh, and I forgot to mention that I used this brush dry. I did not add water to it first. Usually I do. With this one, I did not, because I felt like the water would give me too crisp of a line and it would keep the bristles of the brush pushed together too much. Here I'm going to bring the wave down a little bit farther, almost covering that shadow. And just a hint of some breaks on top of some of these back in the distance here. Now our big wave over on this edge kind of has some of the white moving down into it. So I'm kind of doing the same thing, but I'm flicking downward. And then it's almost just totally broken up here. Okay, a little extra white. And let's do some more. Keep adding layers of this color in the same technique until your wave looks like what you want it to look like. And don't make it even all the way across, you know, bring part of it down a little farther right here. Maybe that's where the wave has come over and actually hit the water below. But on other parts, make sure that you can still see the shadow really well, because a wave doesn't roll perfectly all the way across. Parts of it are going to break before other parts. Obviously back here in the distance where these waves are smaller, the little white blops that I put on the edge of it are going to be much smaller. So don't use the huge size of the breaks that we're doing here in the back. bring that down a bit like it's crashed. This one is quite big, so we'll give this one quite a bit. I'm going to give quite a bit of white on the edge of the water. In the photo, it's almost completely white, but I'm going to kind of stab at it and let it be like a break. I'm not going down over top of the sand color. And if I do a little bit, it's okay because we're going to add some more layers to that. Right here, we'll bring it in a little bit maybe because I have a break in the sand there. I'm using it flat and on the edge, and I'm just kind of scrubbing back and forth. See how the brush is kind of wiggling in one spot? We're going to do a lot of that in a minute. Notice how my brush handle is very long, and I'm holding it way back here. And one of the reasons for that is it helps get these really organic kind of random shapes, but it also makes me stand farther away from the canvas so that I can kind of take in the bigger picture as I'm painting. I'm not so focused on, you know, one piece here and then end up making it so that one piece that I was focused on doesn't mix with everything else. It doesn't fit in. Oh, I forgot to add some white to this little area in here. I do want quite a bit of a break there. Kind of tapering off, and right here, I'm going to just swoop down a little. On the photo, the water kind of breaks down into the beach here, but I did it over here, so I don't feel like I want to do it over here. Now, if you've looked at the photo that we're painting this from, you know that there are rocks all throughout here. So don't worry, I'm not going to make you paint individual rocks. We're just going to give the impression of rocks. And we're going to do that in a few different layers. And I'm going to use this larger flat brush that I used on the waves. So first we're going to add some dark rocks. And I'm going to get some burnt umber, some burnt sienna, and a little black. I want a pretty dark brown here. I can even get just a hint of blue just to gray it down a bit more. Again, I'm going to hold my brush pretty far back. I'm going to hold it so that the bristles are flat, not up and down like that. And I'm just going to touch the end of the brush to the canvas, and I'm going to kind of wiggle back and forth, just kind of randomly. And I'm sure that right off the bat, you're going to think I'm a crazy woman. And if you're doing this on your canvas, you're probably looking at it going, okay, that doesn't look like rocks at all. And it really doesn't look like rocks, but it will help give us the impression that there are rocks there. So just kind of do this all across the bottom. We're not trying to cover up the base color. Mix up more paint whenever you need. I'm going to go ahead and do this all across the bottom, and then we'll come back and we'll work on the next part of it. All right, so I've got that all the way across there. I'm gonna mix up some more color, pretty similar. Still pretty dark, hint of blue. And because the beach is moving farther back from us, the rocks are gonna get smaller. So rather than just going crazy and scribbling it like we did here to get these larger shapes, we're gonna make our scribbles a little bit smaller. I'm just not putting as much pressure. And I'm gonna take it all the way back. I'm not gonna put it too much in my shadows and highlight area because I wanna maintain those spots, but I'm not gonna completely avoid them either. So I'm not gonna stop right there where that shadow is. I might take it up into it a little bit. But I'm focusing it on the mid-tone area. I have almost no paint on my brush for this back area, and that's good because that will prevent it from being too dark and too obvious where they're supposed to be farther away. Now we're going to take that same color we mixed up and we're going to add a speck of white to it. See, it's just barely lighter than what we were doing. And I'm going to start here again, kind of focusing on the areas where I put the first squiggles. Letting some of that first color show and still not trying to cover the rest of the canvas. And the same thing, as we move farther back, I'm using less paint and less pressure. All right, let's get a little more white. Now look at where your rocks are really highlighted. And mostly we just have some bright spots kind of here and there. It doesn't go all throughout. Here close to the fire we've got some. It's really easy to overdo this lighter color, but if you overdo it, that's okay. Because I'm going to show you how to fix that. I'm just going to add a little bit here and there. Not much throughout. Just a slight indication. Actually, now I'm gonna grab some more black and some brown. I'm gonna mix up a super dark color because in the front here, we've also got some very dark. So I'm just gonna do black and brown here. Especially close to that highlight, if you add a little bit more darkness near it, that gives a lot more dimension. And it's a good way to cover up some of the lighter parts that maybe you feel like were a little bit too much and got away from you. But all of these different colors and textures are going to make it feel like a rocky beach. And it is very abstract. If you stand up close to it and look at it, you're going to be able to tell that these are not rocks. I did not try to paint rocks. What I'm painting instead is the lights and the shadows. And the light and the shadow played with everything else. The colors, the orientation of the painting, all of those things played together are going to tell your brain that these are rocks and that these are waves and it's a beach, and your brain will fill in the rest. So you don't have to paint things exactly as you see them to get your point across. That's why I said it was a good thing to look at the photo we're going to paint in a thumbnail. Look at a very small version of it, because then you can't focus on the details. You can only focus on the colors and the shadow and the light. I'm just adding the tiniest shadow of this darker color in places throughout here. And if you get too much of it like I did there, just grab a lighter color and lightly scrub over top of it. Here I'm just dusting. Again, I've probably got 2 hairs of the brush actually touching the canvas. I'm going to add some darker spots here where our fire pit's going to go. And our log is going to be right about here, and there's quite a bit of shadow underneath it. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in right now. This is the shadow on the ground where our log is going to be. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. Let's give an indication of where the fire pit is. So I'm going to take some black, quite a bit, and a little brown just so it's not pure black. And I'm using the burnt umber. And I'm going to use the edge of the brush this time. Remember I said it wasn't good for that, but that's okay here because we're doing impressionistic painting and I'm just giving an indication of where these logs in the fire are. So I'm going to kind of start here and draw one of them about like that. Just kind of wherever you feel like there's a piece of wood in this fire. And my fire looks a little different than the fire in the painting, and I'm okay with that. I'm just going to add a couple more rocks to the base of that fire. Just so the fire doesn't look like it's sitting on top of the beach, that it's actually part of the beach. All right, while we're working with that super light color, let's go ahead and sketch in our log. Again, I'm going to use the edge of the brush, and the shadow I made kind of angles a little bit, and so I'm going to follow that shadow. I'm going to use the same type of brush stroke, but I'm definitely drawing a shape this time. And this doesn't have to be a perfectly shaped log. The one in the picture is quite weathered and irregular, so yours can be really irregular too. All right, let's add some shadows to it. Just with that black and burnt umber mixture, a little bit of white in there. And I'm gonna shadow the bottom here a bit. I think I'm gonna end up going darker than that there. So it almost blends in with the shadow it's casting on the ground. And you can swoop it up just a little bit like that. And it's got some darker spots inside at the end of the log. And then let's add some white. We're going to start really working the highlights on here. You want to make sure that you highlight your log enough so that it doesn't completely blend in with the background. And I'm still doing it the same way as the rocks, just kind of wiggling the brush back and forth. And notice I'm getting lighter and lighter. And of course, across the top edge is going to be the lightest. I'm not filling the whole thing in with each color. I'm just indicating where there's going to be highlight and shadow. Again, just like with the rocks. That's what we're really painting, is the shadow and the highlight. I'm going to keep the inside of that log pretty dark, but I do like a little highlight there. And now I'm going to get quite a bit of white because this top edge is almost blending in with the background. So I'm just mixing the paint I have on my brush, which is actually quite a bit, with some white until I get a very light color. And I'm just streaking it on here and there. I think our log needs a little dark shadow at the back of it, because it's kind of blending in with the rocks right here. So I'm going to bring this shadow, just like I did with the white, where I'm just kind of, I'm touching the log and then flicking. That's really the brush stroke. See, with the edge of the brush, that's what I'm doing. And I'm going to do that at the bottom here. Give it a bit more of a shadow, which will help separate it from the ground. Maybe just a little more inside there. All right, now we're gonna paint our fire, and I'm using the smaller flat brush, similar to the one that I used on the waves. This one's just smaller, and see, it's quite puffy. So for my fire, I got out a tiny drop of Alizarin Crimson, a tiny drop of Naphthol, a tiny drop of Cadmium Yellow Deep, and another tiny drop of Titanium White. So I'm going to get quite a bit of this Alizarin Crimson. It's going to be the shadow in our fire. So when you look at the fire, you see darker and lighter parts. Overall, it looks orange or yellow, but if you look inside of where it's in the log, you can see some darker red. So that's what our alizarin is going to do. My brush stroke here, again, is going to be very similar to what I did with the rocks and even the waves. So I'm going to put the end onto the canvas. I'm going to start down here inside of these and it comes up over the logs in some places, but not in others. I'm gonna bring a little bit out here. And right here, because I want it to look like the wind is blowing it this way, I'm kind of scribbling it and letting it fuzz out. Don't take it out too terribly far, but just enough that it looks like it's moving that direction. You can add some heavier paint to it if you like to get a nice deep color. Now I'm going to let this dry before I add the next layer of paint because I don't want them to mix and I don't want to lift this color off. All right, now that red's not totally dry yet, but it's pretty good. So I'm going to get a little Naphthol and I'm going to put it in the deeper spots here. I'm not going to try and cover all of the alizarin. See how I'm just dunking my brush into there a little bit, just to get a bit on the end. And then I'm just using the edge to kind of push it where I want it. And this color can come out a little bit farther than the alizarin in places. Especially out toward the edges. Where the fire's thinner, it's going to be a little bit of a lighter color. Really kind of let it fuzz at the edges. Okay, I'm going to let that dry one more time and then we'll do our yellow. All right, some cadmium yellow deep hue. Nice bright spots in there, and because this color's so transparent, you'll be able to see the orange and everything through it. Kind of thin here because I really want to see that orange. And a little heavier up here where I feel like the fire is probably the most dense, and I'm going to put my bright highlight in there where it's the hottest. Now I'm going to get some of that yellow and mix it in with this fresh white and get a nice bright yellow. And we've got a little bit of that right here, and the majority of it is kind of right in this area. All right, last thing, and then we're done. We're just gonna add a few highlights to some of these sticks in the fire. So we'll start with this color that we were using on the rocks. I'm gonna add a hint of the burnt sienna into it. And with the edge of my brush again, kind of like we did with the log here. Just on one side. And then you can mix up a little bit of a darker color, just a little bit darker, to bridge the gap in between the highlight and the black of the stick. Don't completely lose the sticks into the background. So just make sure that it's either lighter or darker than the ground so you don't lose it completely. And there you have your fireside beach scene. I hope you enjoyed painting this with me, and I hope you learned a lot about mixing colors, choosing colors, painting from a photo, and also letting go of details and really working in an impressionist kind of way. If you like this video, please make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. I post a new video every week, and I've got some really fun things coming up in the next couple of months, and you don't want to miss it. As always, please feel free to share your painting on my Facebook page. There's a link in the description below. So thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.